Welcome to the deep dive. We are opening a file today that, honestly, it defies almost every historical expectation. We're examining a life so improbable it really does read like fiction.
Absolutely. We've got a stack of sources here detailing the trajectory of a woman who, well, against every single legal and social convention of her time, didn't just marry an emperor. She became, you could argue, the indispensable engine of his power.
We are diving deep into the genesis of Empress Theodora of Byzantium. And our mission today, really, is to understand not just that she rose from poverty, which is amazing enough, but how. How did she distill these brutal, almost transactional skills from her youth into absolute world-altering legislative authority?
Within the Roman Empire, no less. It's an incredible story.
And here's the paradox we really need to get our heads around from the start.
hmm
The woman who would eventually command the entire apparatus of the largest empire in the Western world began her life as the daughter of a simple bearkeeper.
Yeah, an employee in the, let's call it the entertainment wing, of a powerful, often really brutal sports faction in Constantinople. Just think about that contrast for a second.
It's stark. So we're going to track the specific curriculum she completed, if you like, the cold pragmatism learned in the Hippodrome arena,
Yeah.
the sort of forced intellectual awakening out in the deserts of North Africa.
And then the strategic mastery required to literally destroy an ancient Roman law, a law explicitly designed to bar women like her from ever gaining power.
Exactly. This is fundamentally a story of transformation, where what everyone saw as weakness, her background, her profession, that became the very foundation of her, well, world-altering strength.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We're in Constantinople around 500 AD. Theodore is maybe 6 years old, living right in the shadow of the Hippodrome.
hmm And when we say hippodrome, you really have to move past the idea of just like sports teams. These are the factions, the blues and the greens.
Right. These weren't just fan clubs. Not at all. These factions, sometimes called the Demes, they were massive. Think paramilitary, political, and economic entities all rolled into one.
So they're running things on the ground level.
Pretty much. They controlled urban infrastructure, they organized public works, sometimes acted as a local police force. They held extraordinary influence over the ordinary people. Their rivalry basically defined city life.
And could get violent, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. It often erupted into full-scale street warfare. It was serious business.
So Theodora's father, Occasus, he's the bearkeeper for the greens, which means, yes, she lived within the complex, but it was a life completely defined by conditionality.
Exactly. The sources paint this incredible sensory picture, don't they? The rich, almost cloying scent of expensive incense, the thick perfume of orange blossoms from nearby gardens.
And that constant, slightly unnerving rustle of silk, the sound of the faction leaders and their staff moving around. Power had a sound.
It sounds luxurious, but the sources really stress that this luxury was just, the wallpaper for her confinement. She lived in a small, basic chamber, and their entire security depended on the goodwill and the continued employment of the Green faction.
The feeling was one of ever-present watchfulness, the sources say. Always being observed, always knowing your place depends on someone else.
And then that conditional life is just shattered by something utterly common, historically speaking, but personally devastating: fever.
Right. The sources call Axis's death a small seismic collapse. He died quickly. And suddenly, the patronage, the reason they were allowed to be there, was gone.
That specific smell of hay and animal musk that defined him, his presence, it was replaced by this void, this fear that was far more terrifying than any bear.
Because the faction leaders, pragmatic to a fault, saw absolutely no reason to support his dependence.
Nope. The silks, the mosaic floors, even the room they lived in, it was all Green property. Their property. And the family. Expendable.
So the immediate fear was visceral. Utter destitution. Being thrown out into the massive, unforgiving city of Constantinople with nothing.
Which leads us straight into this first major humiliation. The sources frame it as a frantic, hopeless ritual. Theodora's mother, desperate, dresses her 3 daughters in the faded tunics of the Green faction.
And these aren't symbols of pride anymore. They're described as threadbare. Their seams strained, kind of monuments to a life lived constantly on the edge of financial ruin.
Just imagine this scene. The mother pulling her children, described as like fragile, precious lambs, into this opulent, high-ceilinged hall where the Green leaders are lounging.
These aren't just team managers. These are powerful senators, governors, elite financiers, decked out in silks so rich they seem to drink the light fingers heavy with gold rings.
And they don't even grant her the dignity of their full attention. The sources describe their demeanor not as curious, but as mild, bored annoyance, like she's interrupting something important.
Yeah, one leader, apparently, was meticulously examining his perfectly manicured fingernails. Another just swirled the rich wine in his cup, his gaze sort of drifting over the children as if they were furniture.
It's brutal. And the mother's plea was heartbreakingly simple. She wasn't asking for charity, not really. She was asking for the right to work, for the life-sustaining wages that would keep her children from starving.
It was a complete and humiliating surrender of dignity, just laying her life and her children's lives at their feet.
But the leaders, masks of polished indifference, finally the one with the bored gaze, he ends the audience with this tiny, almost effortless gesture, a dismissive wave of a hand.
A gesture that, in that context, carried the weight of a death sentence. Total rejection.
And this detail must have burned itself into Theodora's memory. As the mother pulled her daughters out, defeated, what followed them wasn't silence or even pity. It was cold, derisive laughter.
That sound, the sources say, seemed to bake into the stones beneath their feet. A permanent scar, the lesson learned. The elite view people like her as, well, less than human. Fragility was a weakness they'd just exploit or laugh at.
But that humiliation, that absolute rock bottom, it sparked something. A new desperate resolve in the mother. She didn't just give up.
No, she immediately marched her girls straight towards the headquarters of the sworn enemy, the rival Blue faction.
Now, the Blue complex was just as opulent, but the atmosphere was different, noticeably sharper, colder, the sources say. The guards' eyes held a calculating keenness. They were sizing people up.
They get led to the Blue leader, a man known for his cold pragmatism. No time for sentimentality here.
And the transaction that happens next is just. It's foundational to understanding Theodora's later worldview, I think. The leader's gaze doesn't linger on the mother's tear-streaked, desperate face.
Where does it go?
It settles, slowly and meticulously, on Theodora. On the little girl.
Assessing her potential, even at 6.
Exactly. Assessing her like a merchant assesses livestock, weighing her potential future value against the immediate cost of feeding and housing her. He saw a potential currency, even then.
So he agrees to take them in, shelter them.
He does. But the price wasn't coin. It was, and this is chilling, a lifetime of unquestioning loyalty, a debt that could literally never be fully repaid, ensuring perpetual service to the Blues.
And Theodora, even as a child, she sensed this.
The source suggests she did. Watching his cold, ringed hand sort of seal the deal, she felt the cold weight of new chains settling around her soul. Her mother saw salvation, a roof over their heads. Theodora recognized her future was no longer her own. Survival wasn't a gift, it was a performance dictated by powerful creditors.
So Theodora is now basically absorbed into the Blue faction structure. The Hippodrome becomes her entire world.
Absolutely. By the time she's, say, 10 years old, the roar of the chariots and the mob was the only lullaby she knew. It was this magnificent, fickle, thundering god, and she was its servant.
Her classroom wasn't a schoolroom with books. It was the sand-strewn practice yard. Survival depended entirely on performance. She wasn't learning history or philosophy.
No, she was learning the instantaneous grammar of the crowd, how to read them, how to move them, how to survive them.
And the physical discipline sounds absolutely unforgiving. She learned dance, but not the graceful, measured steps of a noblewoman.
Not at all. She mastered the wild, acrobatic whirls that could mesmerize thousands. Spectacle. Her body was molded into an instrument, muscles constantly aching, feet becoming tough and calloused from the rough ground.
A noblewoman aimed for grace. Theodora aimed for command, control over the audience's attention.
Which leads us right to this critical skill set. The art of projection, both vocal and emotional. She had to learn how to pitch her voice so it could cut through the din of the mob.
And reach the highest, cheapest seats. Why specifically those seats?
Because that audience, way up in the back, they were the most jaded, the most volatile, but also, crucially, the most financially important for the factions in terms of sheer numbers and potential unrest.
So she had to win them over.
She had to. And she mastered the range. She could apparently whisper a secret to the front row, creating this illusion of intimacy, or declare a proclamation to the gods, achieving real theatrical gravitas.
That's the voice of an empress, isn't it? Forged in the noise, trained to command immediate emotional response.
Exactly. But maybe the truly political education came through just watching and mimicking. The arena was packed with the powerful elite senators, governors, generals. Theodora studied them from her position of, well, total powerlessness.
What did she do?
In the practice yard, amongst the other performers, she perfected what the source calls the anatomy of power taught through ridicule.
So she'd imitate them.
Perfectly. She mimicked their flaws, their vanities, the pompous strut of some senator convinced of his own importance, the oily and ingratiating smile of a bureaucrat trying to curry favor, the way they'd stroke their beards in feigned contemplation.
So by mocking them, she was actually dissecting them, understanding their weaknesses.
Precisely. She learned that their power was often built on posture, on affectation, and she learned that a small, well-placed movement, a subtle gesture, could manipulate the crowd's perception, that volatile body politic.
And this mastery translated directly into what the sources call the brutal economy of emotion, reading the crowd.
Like an experienced sailor reads the sea. Yeah, she knew how fleeting their favor was. If the audience was restless, she needed drama. If they were bored, maybe she needed vulnerability. Calculated vulnerability.
There's that chilling detail. A single well-placed tear, tracing a clean path through the dust on her cheek, was literally worth a purse full of copper coins.
She could monetize grief. She understood that power wasn't just about brute strength, it was about strategic weakness, deployed at the right moment.
So by 16, she's a star performer.
Yeah.
But the adoration is, what, a facade?
Completely. She commands the stage, absolutely. But the elite men who paid to watch her, who maybe used her services afterwards, they still saw her as a mima, an actress, in the lowest sense. A temporary diversion, a beautiful object to be admired, used, and discarded.
Her value was constantly being tallied, like goods in a market. Her humanity dismissed.
And this experience, you have to believe, profoundly informed her later reforms when she had power, because she lived in this legal limbo.
How so? What was her legal status?
Roman law classified mime, actresses, in the same category as prostitutes. They lacked basic rights. They couldn't testify against Roman citizens in court. And crucially, men of senatorial rank were explicitly forbidden by law from marrying them.
So legally, she was just a commodity. No pathway to respectability through marriage to someone powerful.
Exactly. She learned indelibly that the entire legislative framework of Rome was built to ensure the continued exploitation of people like her. She was a master of performance, yes, but she was trapped beneath this glass ceiling made of ancient, seemingly immutable law.
And her future ambition then became clear. Not just to succeed within the system, but to shatter that ceiling entirely.
And that ambition, that desire for legitimacy, it eventually led her away from the arena, away from Constantinople for a time.
This is where Hylas comes in.
Right. She encountered Hylas, who is a provincial governor from Pentapolis over in North Africa. And for Theodora, this must have looked like her big chance, a chance to shed the skin of the actress, the mima.
Because he was different.
Well, he was a man of actual rank and responsibility. His authority came from the imperial administration itself, not from the volatile, slightly dodgy factions. And crucially, he offered her something different.
Not just money for a night.
Exactly. He offered a title, a status, for potentially a lifetime to be his acknowledged companion, his consort in his province.
Which for Theodora must have felt like a pardon. An escape route.
Oh, undoubtedly. She accepted without hesitation, the sources say. She saw it as escaping the dust and the constant humiliation of the hippodrome. She probably believed she was finally transforming from a commodity into a respectable woman, close to real administrative power.
But it didn't last, did it?
No. The life in Pentapolis was brutally brief. Governors are political appointments, after all. They get recalled just as easily as they're posted. And when Hylas was summoned back to Constantinople, the betrayal was sudden and absolute.
How did it happen? What are the details?
The details are specific and painful. Hylas packed his fine silks in his chest, not hers. The servants, who had perhaps treated her with some deference before, now averted their eyes.
You just left her.
He left her stranded on the docks of Alexandria, as one might discard an empty wineskin. No final word, apparently. Not a single coin for her trouble or her passage home.
Wow.
Just
abandoned.
utterly. She was 1,000 miles from Constantinople, alone under the crushing weight of the Egyptian sun. And the only currency she possessed now was the very trade she thought she'd escaped. Acting, performing, using her body and wits to survive.
That abandonment must have been devastating, but also maybe instructive.
You could say that. It was humiliating, yes, but perhaps the true turning point. It taught her, in the harshest way possible, that relying on human commitment, or even a physical location, offered no real security. Loyalty was temporary. Power was conditional.
So what did she do? Stranded in Alexandria.
Driven by what the source calls a sharper master than any faction leader, pure hunger, her stage skills were repurposed. Not for display anymore, but for the art of invisibility.
Blending in, surviving.
Exactly. She became a ghost, haunting the back streets, learning where to find scraps of food, where to find uneasy shelter, just focusing on day-to-day survival.
And this despair, this rock bottom, it leads her somewhere unexpected.
It does. It leads her to the small, unassuming chapels of the Monophysite Christians. Now, you might ask, why this specific sect? And this is where the politics get really interesting.
Okay, explain monophysitism in this context. It wasn't the main branch of Christianity in the empire, right?
No, definitely not the one favored by the emperor in Constantinople. The Monophysites were fiercely at odds with the official Chalcedonian orthodoxy. Their core belief that Christ possessed a single divine nature, rather than two distinct natures, human and divine, was more than just theology.
It is political.
Hugely political. It was a massive identity marker for the large, wealthy, and often resentful provinces of Egypt and Syria. They used monophysitism almost as a banner of resistance against what they saw as the tyranny and cultural imperialism of the capital city.
So finding refuge with them wasn't just finding spiritual comfort, it was potentially aligning with a powerful opposition bloc.
Potentially, yes. And the patriarch's words, speaking of a Christ who suffered, who was cast out and despised, resonated deeply with Theodora's own sense of marginalization, her own recent experience of being discarded.
Now, some sources suggest this was a genuine spiritual awakening for her, a true moment of finding faith in her darkest hour.
And maybe it was, on some level. But if we analyze it through the lens of cold, hard political pragmatism, the kind she'd learned in the Hippodrome, we have to consider the outcome. Her conversion could also be seen as a fierce and calculated realignment of her soul.
A strategic move.
It certainly has strategic benefits. She replaced her old stagecraft with a new identity. Piety. She offered her services, perhaps her literacy, her intelligence as a scribe, a messenger within their network.
And in doing so, she's learning again.
Oh, absolutely. Her intellect, honed by reading crowds, now absorbed the intricate political geography of the church. She saw firsthand how doctrine could sway emperors, how church and state weren't really separate entities, but a single coiling serpent of influence.
So the physical hunger in her belly was replaced by something else.
Sure. Exactly, by a different, colder hunger, a thirst for influence, for a power that couldn't be taken away, that couldn't be abandoned on a dock. Alexandria, that crucible of betrayal and faith, forged a new ambition in her. She realized the greatest power wasn't in performing for the elite anymore. It was in becoming the elite's political necessity.
Okay, so Theodora returns to Constantinople. It's 522 AD, and she's completely remade.
Entirely. She doesn't go back to the hippodrome, the bright lights, the crowds. No, she seeks the quiet, strategic shadow of the great palace. Very deliberate.
And her new costume, as the sources put it, is absolute humility. She finds a small, unadorned house near the palace grounds, furnishes it sparsely.
And her main props now, not flashy costumes, but a spindle and a distaff, tools of respectable women's work.
So every morning she sits by the window, spinning wool. It's a deliberate performance, isn't it? A picture of respectable penitence.
Absolutely. The abrasive rhythm of the wool against the spindle is described as both her penance, perhaps, but also a measured and relentless ticking, like a clock counting down. She was waiting.
Waiting for what? Or who?
Waiting, the source suggests, with the certainty of a predator, for the right moment to be seen by the right eyes. She had placed herself, brilliantly, like a spider at the edge of the great web of imperial power.
And the right eyes belong to Justinian.
Precisely. Justinian, nephew, and the clear heir apparent to the aging, childless Emperor Justin. Justinian was a man known for his formidable intellect, quite severe in his demeanor, and utterly consumed by law and administration.
So the old tricks, the emotional manipulation from the arena, and that wouldn't work on him.
Probably not. She needed a different strategy entirely. She had to engage him on his own terms, on intellectual grounds.
And when the moment comes, when his shadow literally falls across her threshold.
She executes the performance of a lifetime, but it's a performance of intellectual confidence. She doesn't rush to greet him, doesn't act coy or subservient. She lifts her gaze, looks him straight in the eye in a direct, unflinching assessment.
Not demure, not bold either, but
seeing him, assessing him as an intellectual equal, meeting his gaze levelly.
And here's the crucial move, right? The thing that defines her shift from actress to potential political player.
Absolutely. She doesn't beg, she doesn't flatter or compliment him, she challenges him. intellectually.
Ow.
She references a specific recent edict that had been debated in the Senate, something concerning property rights. And then leveraging her hard-won real-world knowledge of how the poor and marginalized were actually affected by these laws.
She offers a counter-argument.
A devastating one. She spoke not just about legal theory, the stuff he lived and breathed, but about the unintended consequences on the ground. She argued for equitable interpretation in practice. She used the language of law, but argued from the perspective of lived experience, the perspective of the people the law often crushed.
She engaged him on the only ground he truly respected. Jurisprudence, law.
And Justinian's reaction. He was accustomed only to yes-men and flatterers. He was stopped cold. His shock, the sources say, quickly gave way to intense, rapt fascination.
He saw something different in her.
He found a mind sharp and unafraid. Someone capable of not just understanding the intricate workings of the Roman legal machine, but of critiquing it, improving it. Someone who saw the human cost behind the statutes.
So the relationship begins, it solidifies. But there's this massive barrier remaining, this legal wall.
A colossal one, enshrined in law since the time of Augustus himself. This was the ancient and dusty statute, likely part of the Lex Julia de Adulterius Coercendus, which explicitly forbade men of senatorial rank, which Justinian was from marrying women who were mie, actresses, or prostitutes.
And we need to grasp the weight of this law. It wasn't just a suggestion or a moral guideline.
Not at all. It was a fundamental pillar of the Roman class structure. It was designed to protect the perceived purity of the senatorial bloodlines, to ensure the elite didn't dilute their power and status by marrying down.
So overturning it wasn't just a minor tweak. It was revolutionary, an assault on the established social order.
Absolutely. And Justinian became obsessed with destroying this barrier for them. He framed the demolition not as a personal favor, not I'm doing this for the woman I love, but as pragmatic statecraft.
Oh.
He argued it was necessary reform, an act of imperial clemency. He used his formidable will, his relentless logic, on his uncle, the aging Emperor Justin. He effectively made the case that the law was outdated, archaic, and actually hindered the efficiency of the state by preventing potentially valuable alliances.
And it succeeded.
Stunningly, yes. In 525 AD, the ancient Augustan law wasn't just ignored or bypassed, it was utterly obliterated, wiped from the books, and replaced by a new statute, nicknamed appropriately the Law of Theodora.
Wow, that's power.
That was her first real taste of world-altering power. The actual legislative might of the Roman Empire had been bent and reshaped, specifically for one woman. Theodora, the former actress, the former outcast, had secured her position with the cool expertise of a master artisan.
She made her legitimacy legally unassailable, built her influence on the strongest foundation possible, Roman law itself.
So the destruction of that old law paved the way very quickly for her coronation. She marries Justinian, he becomes emperor soon after, and she's crowned Augusta.
And the ceremony itself, in the Church of the Holy Apostles, the atmosphere sounds intense.
Intense is one word. The sources say it was thick enough to choke on. Not just with the usual incense, but with the cloying scent of masked humanity and deep-seated resentment from the old guard.
The assembled senators, the aristocracy, the very people who maybe sneered at her in the Hippodrome.
Exactly. They were there, rigid in their togas. Their faces, the sources say, were carefully schooled into masks of solemnity, playing their part. But their eyes were naked in their contempt.
They saw the woman who had maybe even mocked them in her arena routines, now holding potentially their legislative future in her hand.
It must have been galling for them. But Theodora, she didn't flinch. That stage training, that mastery of stillness she learned, it served her perfectly now. Her face was a serene, impassive mask.
Hiding what was going on inside.
Hiding the furious, triumphant hammering of her heart, as the source puts it. She stood there, crowned Augusta, Empress of Rome, making this implicit iron vow to herself. She would never be cast out or humiliated again.
And just 7 years later, that vow gets tested, violently, in the Nika riots.
The ultimate test. The blues and the greens, the very factions that had defined her youth, that had held her life in their hands, suddenly, shockingly, abandoned their centuries-old rivalry.
And united against the throne.
United in a singular, unifying venom against Justinian and Theodora.
What sparked it? What was the trigger?
It started, as these things often do, with something relatively small: the botched execution of a few members from both factions who'd been involved in some recent street fighting. When the executions went wrong, the crowd in the Hippodrome just exploded.
They turned on the government.
Completely. They abandoned the chariot races and turned their fury towards the imperial box. The chant went up, "Nika, Nika," which means conquer or win. They were screaming for the overthrow of the emperor.
And it wasn't just chanting, was it? The city erupted.
Total anarchy. Massive fires broke out, spreading rapidly, consuming huge parts of Constantinople, including the original Hagia Sophia Church and key administrative buildings. The imperial palace itself was besieged.
And inside the palace, panic.
Absolute panic. Justinian's inner circle, his key advisors, generals, they were reportedly pale and sweating, urging immediate flight. The royal barges were apparently waiting at the palace docks. Their logic was simple: panic and survival. Get out while you still can.
And Justinian himself, the normally decisive emperor.
He was ashen, the sources say, seriously contemplating escape, contemplating the utter humiliation of being deposed, probably hunted down and killed. He was wavering. And Theodora, she watched this panic unfold. She watched it, and then she uncoiled. She stepped forward into the council. Her voice, reportedly, was stripped now of all artifice, honed to a blade's edge, no performance now, just raw will.
And her speech, it's become legendary. What was the core of her argument?
It's legendary because she shifted the entire conversation away from mere survival towards legacy. That was the key. She argued that to flee, even if they survived, was to become a refugee, a ghost begging at the courts of foreign kings. A fate, she implied, worse than death for a Roman emperor and empress. Utter infamy.
But to stay, even if they died.
To stand and die there, in the palace, wearing the imperial purple, that was an eternity. The purple, she famously said, was the noblest shroud a sovereign could ever know. She basically offered Justinian a stark choice: infamy or legend.
And that famous line,
"I will not flee. Those who have worn the crown should not survive its loss. Never will I see the day when I am not saluted as empress." And then the killer line, "Royalty is a fine burial shroud." Or, as often paraphrased, the purple makes a fine winding sheet. She stated plainly she would rather die an empress than live as a refugee.
Wow, that must have cut through the panic.
Like a knife. Her unwavering courage, her focus on legacy over life, it acted like a psychological shockwave. It restored Justinian's own grim, ferocious clarity. The thinking probably went: if she, the former arena girl, refused to flee, how could he, the emperor?
So the decision was made. Stay and fight.
Exactly. The orders were given immediately to the loyal generals, Belisarius and Mundus.
And their plan? How did they handle a city in revolt?
And it was ruthlessly effective. A cold, calculated exercise in mass execution, really. The generals realized the mob, thousands strong, was largely consolidated in one place: the vast open space of the Hippodrome, celebrating their apparent victory.
The very place Theodora started.
The irony is staggering. The tactic was brutally simple: seal the exits to the Hippodrome, trap the mob inside, and then send in the professional, disciplined imperial troops against the packed, largely unarmed civilian mass.
What followed must have been horrific.
The sources are blunt. It was not a battle, but a slaughter. The soldiers, likely the emperor's own household troops and maybe some mercenaries, drove the panicked mob, cornered and frantic, into the center of the arena.
And the sand.
The sand of the Hippodrome, the very stage of her youthful humiliation and performances, drank deep that night. By the following dawn, estimates range, but commonly cited figures suggest 30,000 citizens lay dead.
30,000.
An almost unimaginable number. The rebellion was utterly, brutally extinguished. The throne was secured, yes, but secured by absolute terror. And secured, arguably, forever, in the sense that no one would dare challenge them so openly again.
We have to pause here, though, critically. Theodora, herself a victim of factional cruelty and dismissal,
saved her empire and herself by orchestrating the mass execution of the very factional populace, the ordinary people of Constantinople, that once defined her world. Cheered her, perhaps.
It's a profound, maybe terrifying display of ruthlessness, a lack of mercy towards the very crowd she knew so well.
It is. But the result, from a purely political standpoint, was undeniable. From that day forward, no one in Constantinople would ever again doubt the political will or the iron resolve of Empress Theodora. Her word was law, backed by the chilling memory of the Hippodrome massacre. Fear became a very powerful instrument of her control.
So the silence that falls over Constantinople after the Nika riots, it's not peace exactly. It's described as hard-won and deeply feared stability.
Exactly. And for the next 2 decades, Until her death, Theodora ruled, not just as a consort, but as a true co-regent alongside Justinian, weaving her will, her experiences into the very fabric of Roman law, relentlessly, pragmatically.
And her legal legacy, which sometimes gets overshadowed by the drama of her rise in the Nika riots, is maybe her most impactful political achievement in the long run.
I think you could argue that. Her reforms weren't just abstract legal tinkering. They were often described as monuments of mercy, explicitly forged in the memory of her own suffering, her own humiliation.
Let's get into specifics. What kind of laws are we talking about?
Well, she directly targeted the very system that had commodified her and women like her. She pushed through edicts specifically focused on tearing young women from the grip of forced prostitution. Brothel keepers who preyed on poor families faced harsh penalties.
So this wasn't just like social work. It was using the power of the state, the law, to grant agency where the law previously only offered exploitation, giving women a choice.
Precisely. And she backed it up with resources. She established sanctuaries across the city, quiet cloisters, some apparently named metanoia, which means repentance, where these women could find genuine refuge.
What happened there?
They could learn trades, like spinning wool, that symbol of her own patient waiting, and basically rebuild their lives with dignity, protected by imperial decree. She reportedly poured her own treasury funds into making sure these women had a viable alternative, a path to legitimate, protected labor, a choice she never had back in Alexandria.
And she also looked at laws concerning women and family.
Yes, fundamentally altering things there too. She pushed for laws that gave mothers increased rights over their own children, a power, remember, that had been cruelly denied to her own mother when her father Accasus died.
Which, in the context of Roman law, was huge, right? With patria potestas, the father's power, being so absolute.
Absolutely radical. In that strictly patriarchal Roman system, giving mothers more legal standing, more control over their children's future, especially regarding property or inheritance, was a major shift. It gave previously unavailable legal leverage to women, particularly those in the lower classes who were most vulnerable.
It feels like every law, every reform was personal for her. Like she was systematically dismantling the legal structures that enabled her own past suffering.
The sources suggest exactly that. Each edict was like a ghost laid to rest, a stone placed firmly over the grave of the destitute, powerless girl she had once been. She was using the ultimate tool she had mastered, legislation, to remake the rules of the game.
And then there's her most visible legacy, the one people can still see today, Hagia Sophia.
Ah, yes, the Great Church. She championed its immediate and incredibly magnificent rebuilding after the Nika riots burned the previous church to the ground. She and Justinian poured the empire's treasury, and certainly her formidable will, into making it unprecedented.
And the resulting structure. It was more than just a church, wasn't it?
Oh, far more. With its revolutionary dome seeming to just hang from heaven itself, defying gravity, it was a permanent, unavoidable physical statement. A statement of imperial might, resilience, stability, and of course, divine favor.
It basically told the people of Constantinople and the world, we survived. We are stronger than ever. We cannot be defeated, even by the destructive force of a united mob.
Exactly. It solidified their reign in stone and mosaic.
Her death, when it came in 548 AD, wasn't from an assassin's dagger, which maybe some expected or hoped for.
No, it came from cancer, described as a silent, creeping enemy within, and the account suggests she faced it with the same defiance that marked her entire life. Her spirit remained unbowed, even as her body failed. She was involved in state affairs until the very end.
And she was buried, fittingly, in the imperial purple. The barefoot girl who once begged for scraps from the blues had become arguably the most powerful woman the Roman world would ever know.
She completely rewrote the script, dismantled every legal and social assumption about what a woman, particularly one from her class, her background, could possibly achieve. Tag outro s'more.
So when you step back, the sheer magnitude of Theodora's journey is just immense.
Right.
Moving from a life defined entirely by factional debt, by social humiliation, by being legally less than,
to literally commanding the legislative power of the Roman Empire, bending the ancient laws of Rome to her will. It's extraordinary.
And what's so fascinating, what our sources really push us to think about, is how her brutal schooling in the Hippodrome actually became her unique political advantage.
It really did. She learned the anatomy of power, how to read a room, how to project emotion, how to command attention, how to analyze weakness, not from dusty scrolls, but from the gutter up, from direct, lived, often painful experience.
She knew the cost of failure intimately because she'd lived it. on the docks of Alexandria and the Hall of the Greens.
And she took those skills of the performer, the ability to manipulate public perception, the mastery of stillness under pressure, the strategic use of vulnerability, and applied them with incredible precision to the highest levels of imperial administration and law.
Achieving not just stability for the empire, often through ruthless means, let's be honest, but also surprising mercy and foresight in her reforms for women and the marginalized.
It's that combination that's so compelling.
The source material leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. It suggests that for the aristocracy, the old power structures who wanted to keep people like her in their place, the most horrific reality of all wasn't actually her low origins. It wasn't the sex work or the acting.
What was it then?
It was the fact that a victim, someone they despised and dismissed, could discover the full extent of their own power precisely because they understood the system's weaknesses from the inside out, and then use that power to remake the world itself.
She understood their vulnerabilities because she had entertained them, studied them, mimicked them. She knew where the levers were.
Exactly. So maybe we leave you, the listener, with this to consider. What elements of perceived weakness or shame or outsider knowledge in your own history or in society today, when truly understood, harnessed, and strategically repurposed, what could they become the foundations of? Perhaps even world-altering strength.
Something to think about. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.